Who created the universe? The universe I created. Who other than one with miraculous fingers like mine would have the power of creation? The universe I created. Ahmad Shamlu, born upon the dark spear. The knothole stands out on the otherwise level oak of the desk, a small black hole that draws in any attention that comes near it. At its event horizon, a burn ring the size of the base of a cup, long since drawn down to the grain rather than merely resting upon it. It borders on a miracle that this piece of furniture ever made it through the meter-wide door and into this room. A great many must have been involved in the process, an immense exertion for flesh and wood, to which the short but deep notches cut across the run of the grain readily attest. The oil treatment intended as aftercare still shimmers through the lesions today. Nothing here can serve as protection if it comes to that. A bullet would eat its way effortlessly through this wooden behemoth, along with whoever happens to be sitting behind it and has the privilege of taking these centimeters of torn oak along for company on the road to hell. It is not here to stop anything. It is here to perform the simple function of holding. Footnote 1. Quote, "Producing is always something grafted onto the product, and for that reason, desiring production is production of production, just as every machine is a machine connected to another machine. We cannot accept the idealist category of expression as a satisfactory or sufficient explanation of this phenomenon. We must not attempt to describe this schizophrenic object without relating it to the process of production. The schizophrenic is the universal producer. There is no need to distinguish here between producing and its product. We need merely note that the pure thisness of the object produced is carried over into a new act of producing. The table continues to go about its business. The surface of the table, however, is eaten up by the surrounding framework. The non-termination of the table is a necessary consequence of its mode of production." Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari, Anti-Oedipus. A place of dwelling in the grey-on-grey of the tiles and walls, which coil around the two motivational posters in this room. A triple-glazed window, located slightly to the right of the door. Behind the desk sits a man in a chestnut cardigan, hands folded over a closed file. Clean fingers and hands with no trace of work nor age. Behind the man and to the left of him stands a woman, feet at shoulder width, hands behind the back, one wrist held in the other holding a clipboard between its fingers. Chin held level, gaze unmoved by the arriving addition to this room's mass. Weight evenly distributed and undisturbed since the door was opened. Although she stands there in a suit, nobody could strip the councilwoman of the lives she lost in the military. The war took everything else from her. It is a shape it knows. It is a mirror for the small something that was writhing a great deal more nervously in that one empty chair a few weeks ago. This chair has the purpose of making a someone out of a something. "Good morning, Nix." It does not answer to Nix. It was a nameless self, a particle of contingency in a shoreless emptiness until she gave it the name Pin. Pin, a small metal thing whose function is to penetrate objects in order to hold them where they are needed. No answer is expected of it. He never waits anyway. This is Councillor Varick. She has been sent by the council to sit in on our next sessions. Short glance from him in her direction, a small gesture with a hand. "The work the two of us are doing is new. You are one of the first to receive this treatment. She has been sent to see what we do here." The woman does not look at it. To her it is a thing, and as a thing it disappears along with the rest of the things in the periphery of her field of vision. "Now, I've got some good news, and I'm happy that I can be the one to tell you two about it. He lifts his arms and releases the file. In here is material a scouting team recovered from ruins. It is an offer, a quantity of questions, a kaleidoscope. Footnote 2. Quote, the subject, as the bearer of qualities it can lose, might initially be viewed as kaleidoscopic. It finds itself in a state of ceaseless redefinition. In this way, it remains a substance. Yet it is a substance riddled with holes, communicating so excessively with what it is not that it appears as a hollow aggregate of its attributes. Around this void, the subject asserts its being, as an entity both fragile and constant. End of quote. Markus Steinweg, Metaphysik der Leere, translated by me. She and I do not know what answers lie hidden in it, what any of it will turn out to mean. She will go through my notes afterwards, and if you like, you may have a look at them too. There will be no answers to be found there. You are the only one who can tell us who you were. Counselor Varick remains still. It's very simple in the end, he says in the voice of a man for whom the smallest and largest things are separated by almost nothing. Just say what comes to your mind, nix. He opens the folder and takes out a photograph. He turns it face down, lays it on the desk, and lets it glide slowly across the old oak with 2 fingers. Just look at it, nothing else. A window. Frost forming on the inside of the glass. Beneath it a table, considerably slimmer than the one the picture's resting on. A haunting fragility. An empty cup. What was once powder has settled firmly enough to make it seem bottomless, only the white of the material staring back in a few spots. Something resembling lipstick on its neck. The corner of the back of a chair. Frost is on the inside, he says. So it's colder in that room than outside, and the cup is standing there as though somebody had forgotten it. He's not looking at the picture. His emeralds are fixed on nix. That's everything that I got. How about you? Does that picture tell you anything? It says nothing. They wait. Time drips in the ticking rhythm of the clock on the wall behind Nix, down through the rivulet of every possible room to maneuver. His expression stays unmoved. Looks past him. She goes on looking at the wall. The majority in the room appear indifferent to the vicious drag of time, unlike Nix, who notices with rising nervousness that the arithmetic on offer is not in its favor. Seeing it fidget, he decides to help a little. What's outside of that window? Nothing. It's white. Snow or fog? It looks at the white. The white is just whiting. Snow. Snow, he writes. Thank you. Counselor Varick remains as she was. The second photograph is smaller and printed on thicker paper with a scalloped edge. He lifts a sheet of paper the photo was attached to, reads it, lets it fall back down with the printed side face down, and turns the photo over. A girl in front of a mostly intact low wall holding a bicycle wheel in her hand. Footnote number 3. Quote, if you let it go too far, it would be the end of everything. You would have bicycles wanting votes, and they would get seats on the county council and make the roads far worse than they are for their own ulterior motivation. But against that, and on the other hand, a good bicycle is a great companion. There's a great charm about it. End of quote. Flann O'Brien, the third policeman. No bicycle inside, just the wheel, held by the rim with both hands. Her expression is neutral. The only striking thing about it is the slight, natural pout of her lips. You were what, 11? I don't know. Not important, somewhere around there, I'd wager. He writes it down anyway. This looks a bit strange, doesn't it? It's probably because of the age of the photo. What would you say? Was it brighter than it looks at the time? It looks at the girl in front of the wall. The girl looks grayish. It was brighter. He nods slowly in agreement. The wheel, was that yours, or were you carrying it for someone? Carrying it. For whom? Again, no answer. He waits for a bit, then looks at the councilwoman with a smile. Your sister? Yes. Older or younger? Older. There we go. He seems pleased. That's good, Nix. That's very good. He draws the very out, losing himself a bit in his own thoughts. Councillor Varick stands as she has all along. The third picture is larger than the others and has to be unfolded once. The crease has taken the emulsion with it, so there's a white line running through everything in the frame, splitting heaven and earth apart. He sets it down and folds his hands. A machine of war lying on its stomach in a field. It is large enough that the field has to be worked out from it rather than the other way around. The grass comes to the height of what could be considered its shoulder joint. The massive mech has settled deep into the ground. Footnote 4. Quote, by focusing on these narratives of gargantuan prototype scandalous creatures who can irradiate their moods or swell their limbs beyond the dominion of the law, the known, and the real, we can begin to contemplate how such strange movements toward immeasurability are in fact attempts to render a countercurrent to absolutism. Against paradigms of oneness or unity, here we are faced with multiple contenders to apotheosis, giants and leviathans that are never inaccessibly far removed from mortals, but are instead menacingly apparent in their fathomless, towering presence. We must probe the secret of their loathing for the structures of humankind, the angered swings of their arms, and their supra-mythic madness. In other words, we must read these tales of colossi as subversive anti-totalitarian gestures, tectonic shifts toward vulnerability and chaos. For it is beneath their shadow that one might dream beyond the enclosure of a world. End of quote. Jason Bahbak Mohaghegh, Omnicide. Some woody plant life has worked its way through the giant's heart, poking out on the other side. Footnote number 5. Quote, the bud disappears in the bursting forth of the blossom, and one might say that the former is refuted by the latter. Similarly, the blossom is declared a false existence of the plant by the fruit, and the latter emerges as its truth in place of the former. These forms not only differ from one another, but also displace each other as mutually incompatible. Yet their fluid nature simultaneously makes them moments of an organic unity in which they not only do not conflict, but are each as necessary as the other, and it is precisely this equal necessity that constitutes the life of the whole. End of quote. Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Phänomenologie des Geistes. Translated by me. The enormous flank of this colossus has been worn away, slowly but surely, and with great effort by bullets and claws. You can just barely make out the shadow of a symbol. A crescent? A round arc interrupted at one point by a deep claw scar. At its center, a short horizontal stroke pointing left, into the interior of the circle. What preserves this geometric figure is the rust that eats its way out from inside it. The cockpit is empty. Something round, it says, without a question having been asked. Yes, he says, it is. She painted it on. It's a wheel, she says, and something vaguely related to life returns to her eyes. He raises an eyebrow and writes for longer than that one sentence made decodable sound available. How long do you think it takes for all of that to happen to the steel of a machine? 2 years, maybe 3? Nix answers. So after all that time, somebody went out there to take a picture of a destroyed machine. He leans back in his chair. Who took the photograph? That was me, she says. No comment on it, no note. Instead, he reaches into the file and places the first picture besides this one, an empty chair, an empty pilot seat. Where two things are placed side by side, there arises a third that is contained in neither of them. Nothing has to be made or added. You put two things near enough and wait for long enough, and sooner or later, the space in between will become productive on its own. And she starts talking. The cup was her sister's. Nobody moved it. The room stayed exactly as it was for a long time, because moving anything would have meant deciding against someone's will who had no chance to voice a veto. Her sister joined the rebellion for her safety. At first she received letters, then came the silence. Rumors spread about her appearing on the other side. Months later, when she herself was no longer living at home, she stumbled upon this giant's corpse. She needed to take a picture to have proof, to make sure something of her remained. She talks for a long time. The pen has returned to silence long before she finishes. Nix continues and nothing is stopping her until she runs out of words to fill with meaning. Thank you, Nix, lets the name linger. She looks into his eyes. The fourth photograph. You'd have seen this kind of image, he says, and she has, everyone has. To say there were dozens of them would be an understatement. I know because I lived through it, too. Not at the front, I was never at the front, but in the basements where I spent most of my time writing letters to the parents of children I had never met. It is something very different, a photograph of a poster hanging on a brick wall. You can make the wall out at the edge of the frame, even though the red has long since taken its leave thanks to many changes of weather. The silhouette of a young woman on some sort of advertising poster or wanted notice. The face has not been recognizable for a long while. The text beneath it has suffered the same fate. She does, however, make out the contours of a name. Nix Weiss. That is me. She has the scratch of a pen across paper. His hands are still folded. I saw, like everyone else, how they used heroines up. You had to come from somewhere. Hounds, the capable ones, the ones who were still left, even once everything that had originally been their motivation was long gone. He tells it as though it were the 100th time he has given the speech. You were one of them, Nix. One of the greats. One of the great many. Can I keep it? No, he says, kindly, but without reserve. But it stays here with me. It doesn't go anywhere. Friday will continue. He gestures for her to stand up, and so she does. On her way out, standing in the doorframe, she stops. She wants to say something, but doesn't know what the correct procedure would be for doing so she just says, thank you. The girl leaves the frame. Counselor Varick brings her hands out from behind her back and lays the clipboard along her forearm again. Where did the poster and pictures come from? A crate in a district office in Hallberg. There were tons of them, the pictures at least. The poster was created with the help of one of our nifty machines. It has learned from all the different posters that were still flying around. She notes something down. How much of what happened today was in the file? He hands the file over. None of it. There is no file. He picks up the last photograph and, with the rest, tosses them lazily into a drawer of the desk. There are images from a whole lot of different crates and then some generated ones. Who knows if any of them have anything to do with each other or not? The Empire was thorough. What came before the Hound is not simply damaged, it is completely gone. There are no records anywhere of who any of these people were, her included. And the name? Just an idea I had after seeing her for the first time. She waits a moment, then says, Can you determine what she develops into? A shrug, a subtractive procedure reduced to a skeleton. Then, I said it was very simple. Nobody arrives with a fully scripted life. It is something we build from impressions. But what is more fundamental than a name to be called by? To have an idea of what you have to measure up to have a consistent identity. I am their world. I am their father. I am a question they have to answer. A question can never be wrong. Footnote number 6, quote, "The will to truth is a fascisizing tendency. It's not something that just wants an answer and is done. It's something that forces you to go on and on forever with an and. Cannot be done. You cannot be satisfied with an answer. It's a paranoid function of the ego, and you have to be aware." End of quote. Lilith Olivia on Blue Sky.